Hello and welcome to Michael's Minty Music for today. Today we review Fight Songs, the music of Team Fortress 2, composed by Mike Morasky, released in 2017. This includes many of the songs used throughout the live service game's lifespan up to that point, which was about a decade. So this was a decade of stuff, basically. It's a pretty good soundtrack. This is the track listing. And these are the tracks I added to my playlist, 24 out of 33, more than 2/3, which is really good for a soundtrack album like this. This album basically never has a run of songs which I don't like, and it has a couple of sections which kind of just keep going with the good tracks, which is good, that's what you want. It's hard to discuss the album's flow since it's a soundtrack, so that's pretty easy to get. Medic is a really good inspired choice for the opener. And it manages to continue with Intruder Alert and The Calm, which are both really good. By the time you get to Red Triumphs, the 7th track, the album has managed to build up some momentum, which it uses to push through to the halfway mark. The Haunted Fortress theme, being the start to the second half, is weird, but once you get to Robots, 19th track, the momentum returns in force and it keeps going to the end. The final third that starts with Blue Triumphs is great all the way to the end. They keep some of the most iconic tracks like the main theme and Right Behind You until basically the end of the album, and the handful of sort of 2017 Pyro update tracks at the end are quite a good closer. Yeti Park, Saxton's Dilemma, and Mercenary Park are all pretty good. Saluting the Fallen wasn't originally the final track, but they added it after the voice actor for the soldier passed away. It's a pretty good ending, actually. It makes the soundtrack feel a lot more sort of regal than Mercenary Park. The last three tracks there are kind of not goofy, but a little bit more aggressive, and Saluting the Fallen is a bit more sort of regal and calm. The genre here is really interesting. It's kind of a rockabilly James Bondish mix with some country and techno influences. There's a lot of trumpets, saxophones, and percussion. The synths are mostly pretty hidden with a few exceptions, so the techno stuff doesn't come out that much, but it is still there. It's pretty jazzy overall, but not very improv, still kind of tight, so kind of orchestral and big band kind of thing. So that really sounds like a 60s or 70s spy movie overall, but with so many different songs, you don't really get a clear picture of anything. There's a lot of different stuff going on, but overall that's kind of the sound. It's a very good and interesting soundtrack. A lot of the tracks here are just interesting. There are obviously no singles released here, and I think my favorite song is probably 24 Blue Triumphs. I like the two Triumph songs best here, although Robots is pretty great. But I think that the Blue Triumph is a little bit more natural. The red one sounds a bit like a sort of a march, while the blue one sounds a bit more like a wild celebration, which I prefer. I rank this album second out of the three soundtracks I've heard composed by Mike Morasky between the two Portal soundtracks. This one is interesting. I think that it's the same level of quality as the Portal 2 soundtrack, but the Portal 2 soundtrack is a bit more consistent in its sound, and it remains interesting despite that. The TF2 soundtrack kind of has to go to a bunch of different stuff to stay interesting, while Portal 2 manages to sort of stick with one style and still keep it interesting, just with techno stuff. And I think that is slightly superior. Additionally, I rank this soundtrack 7th out of the 13 video game soundtracks I've listened to, so right in the middle. I like the Splatoon soundtracks better than pretty much anything, but I think the TF2 soundtrack is definitely a lot better than pretty much all the Half-Life soundtracks. So this spot in the middle makes sense. It's definitely more interesting than the Half-Life original soundtrack, and most of the other ones are below that. Also, this album does not take my top spot from 2017. That stays with Imagine Dragons Evolve, which I love, and is a more traditional album, which unsurprisingly works against the soundtrack here. Soundtracks usually aren't my favorite from the year unless it's a really great soundtrack and the year is kind of dry. The TF2 soundtrack is good, but it's not better than the best traditional albums released in 2017. So thank you for watching. Next up is AJR's 2017 album, The Click. It was their first really big hit album, so I'm interested to see how they improved over their last one, which was popular but not really big. like this one. So stay tuned for that. And as always, stay minty.